on down to the Ohio HD Gear Show, March 12th, 2020! All of our friends are going to be there. Arri, Electrosonic, MAGSTOR, Sony, Blueshade, Central Ohio AV, Fujifilm, Westcott, Inner Circle, Canon, and many more! If you're a media professional, or just looking for an excuse to visit, then this show is for you! We also have t-shirts. Yay!
Oh, great. Like I needed a reason to hang out with a bunch of sweaty video nerds all day.
What I don't understand is, what's with the puppets?
Puppets? What?
Well, so come on down to the Ohio HD Gear Show. It's gonna be great!
We're back with Arri here. We got a really cool demo. I'm going to introduce Art. Let's come to the stage. All right.
Hey everyone, my name is Art Adams. I am the cinema lens specialist for Arri, and I'm going to be talking to you about signature primes. And I'm going to be showing you a lot of pictures, and I'm going to do it as quick as I can. I don't want to leave anything out, but usually this is a longer presentation. It's action-packed, so I'm just going to get started. Signature primes are, well, this is the most boring slide. I will get it out of the way quickly because it's just a lot of text, and I want to show you pictures. 16 focal lengths from 12 to 280, 14 focal lengths of T1.8, consistent look and quality across all focal lengths. They are multi-format, which means they work equally well on Super 35 and large format. And we really tried to design these lenses so that they will be kind of the super speeds for the next 20 years. We want them to still be relevant in 20 years. So we don't want them to have a dated look. We don't want them to feel vintage. We want them to just have a character that lasts, especially as display technologies get better and better. We're going to see more and more of the character of the lenses that we use. And we want to make sure that character is both interesting, but also we want to make sure it kind of gets out of the way, especially in UHD and HDR, where things like lens flares and distortions and softness aberrations, they can kind of distract from the story. So we wanted to create beautiful lenses that don't distract. So what we tried to do is we tried to capture the look of Arri cameras in glass. And I'm going to walk you through exactly how we did that, because Arri cameras are known for their look. I think in a lot of ways, they are the epitome of film captured in digital. But there's some very specific aspects of that look, and I'm going to walk you through exactly what we did optically to try to preserve that. So first of all, I'm going to talk about faces. So I shot several different lenses under exactly the same conditions, because I think the best way to see the difference between lenses and to kind of identify the character of a lens is to compare them. I'm not going to name them because there is no real right or wrong when it comes to lenses. All I can do is show you how they look. I can't make you like the look. I can't make you like something that you don't like. But what I can do is show you what I have to offer you. And if you like it, then you know where to find it. So this is a signature prime. It's a 75 millimeter shot at T4. I tried to shoot all these lenses at T4 to get them into the sweet spot for resolution. And you know, lenses don't tend to work really well wide open. So I didn't want to put any lens at a disadvantage or be accused of doing that. So I shot them all stopped down just to level the playing field. And I got all the focal lengths as close as I could to 75 as possible. So here's the first comparison. So the things that I notice, normally I ask the audience, but since we're streaming, it's a little more difficult. What differences they see. The differences I see between the lens on the left and the signature prime. The lens on the left feels cooler. All the blue tones in the image feel bluer to me. Her flesh tone is a little cooler. And also, if you look at her skin texture, especially under her right eye, it feels a little extra detailed, a little extra crispy to me. Whereas the signature prime, we worked really hard on skin tones. We wanted to preserve the resolution of a really high resolution lens, but we didn't want to scare actors. We wanted people to feel comfortable in front of these lenses. So we worked really hard to smooth skin tones out without sacrificing any detail. And the result is a look that's just very natural. One DP that we've worked with, he bought one of the first sets of signature primes. He says it's like looking through a beautiful window, which is perfect. Second lens, also very, very blue, very cool, really accentuating the blue tones. And her skin tone is cool, the background is a little bluer. This lens to me feels a little softer. I don't know if you can see that on the stream or here in the studio, but on a really high resolution monitor, you can see that it's just a little bit softer. And nobody ever got in trouble for making an actor or an actress look a little bit smoother. But we're not really that kind of company. We want to preserve everything in the image we can. We just want to make people look great. We don't want to really throw anything away, which is kind of what happens when you create a lens that has it's not high resolution, so you're losing detail. We wanted to preserve the detail. We just didn't want to accentuate it. In a way, it's almost like saying the micro contrast, the contrast in the fine details is a little smoother. It's a little lower on our lenses. And then this third lens, once again, very cool. And this was a surprise to me because I kept asking, so why are our lenses so much warmer? What was the philosophy behind that? And the optical team kept coming back and saying, what are you talking about? And because from their perspective, these lenses are just slightly warmer than dead-on neutral. And it turns out a lot of these other lenses photograph very cool. And it has to do with their choice and what kind of glass they're using and what they're trying to build the lens for cost-wise and the things they're trying to do. And our lenses are more expensive, but they tend to be much more neutral in color. And the flesh tone, we did specifically put an extra little warm pop in there just to accentuate it. And once again, the background is much more neutral. And this is more like what I remember when I shot this because it was a red brick wall, fake red brick wall, lit with blue light. So the two kind of cancel each other out. The background didn't really feel that cool to me at the time. The background on the right feels much more like what I remember. And then this is the close-up detail. So once again, the lens on the left, lots of texture in there, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we have just as much texture and detail on the signature prime. It's just not as poppy. It's not as crunchy. And that's something we really worked hard on because resolution is a combination of contrast and sharpness. And we wanted to keep the resolution, but we didn't want it to feel as classically sharp. And then also, once again, see this hair draped across her forehead. It's really interesting on that lens on the left just how sharp it really is. But it's almost a little unnaturally sharp to me because if I look at an image and I say that's sharp or that's soft, that means it's a deviation from normal. And what we were really going for was normal, natural, like you were just looking at a person. Like you wouldn't look at someone and say, why that hair is really sharp. You would just say, hey, there's a hair hanging across their forehead. And then as far as contrast, it's interesting. We're often told that our lenses feel like they're low contrast lenses. In a way they are. Lens B to me feels very low contrast. But it's mostly because it's picking up a lot of flare from the background, and there's not a real true black. If you really look at that on a high-resolution monitor, you can see that there is no really solid black. On the signature prime, the darker midtones match what lens B is doing, but we do have a solid black under her hair, which is really interesting. One ASC DP who took a look at these talked about he really likes what he calls their journey into black. So he likes the fact that he can see really well into shadows, but at the same time, he's not losing anything. He's not getting that boost due to flare. There's still a crisp, clean black in there. And then the other thing that's really interesting is that I asked our optical team, what are we doing to make our lenses magically brighter? Because all the other lenses look the same exposure, and ours is brighter. So I assumed, of course, that ours was the outlier. And they said, well, there's this thing called focus ramping. And what it means is T-stops are set looking through the center of the lens. with the focus set at infinity. And as soon as you focus closer on a lot of lenses, all bets are off. And especially if a lens breathes, you'll lose exposure as it focuses closer. And it turns out our signature primes just don't do that. So what I did was I took a piece of typing paper and I put it across the front of a matte box. And I lit it up as evenly as I could. And then I focused a signature prime from infinity to 6 feet. And I did the same thing with another lens. And that's the difference. It's pretty significant. It's a half stop or so. And you might not notice that under normal conditions because if someone walks up into a close-up and then they get a little darker, well, they're filling more of the frame, so you may not notice the exposure drop-off. But if you like to know your lens is holding exposure all the way through the focus range, I can demonstrate that these lenses do that. And this is what the waveform monitor looks like. So a lot of times I like to check my work on a waveform monitor because I don't always trust my eyes. Brains are easily fooled. I like to make sure. And this is chromatic aberration. So chromatic aberration is something that we can't completely eliminate, but we can control it and throw it in a direction that we feel is more pleasing. So the lens on the left, well, actually, I should say this chart, first of all, is designed to break lenses when it comes to chromatic aberration. And in each case, I focused the lens at exactly the same distance, both in front of the chart and behind the chart to see what happened. And there's the difference. So that's only 3 or 4 inches in front of the chart. Now, this is a pretty extreme case. This chart is made to do this, but it kind of shows the difference. Now, the signature prime got a little warmer, and that's okay because we can't completely eliminate chromatic aberration, but we can make it so you don't notice it. These lenses go warm and cool when it comes to chromatic aberration, and those are colors you don't notice because you see them in light all around you. When you see green or magenta or cyan or red, you tend to notice that because unless you're in a city street or something surrounded by neon, you don't normally see those in nature. So we can't get rid of chromatic aberration, but we can make it so that if you see it, you probably won't notice it. So now we're going to focus the other direction. So the signature prime got a little cool. The other lens got a little bit, got a little bit magenta. Okay, so now we're going to talk about bokeh. So the camera itself, it doesn't feel necessarily sharp, but it's clear. And this goes back to what I was describing earlier. We didn't really want sharp lenses. We wanted lenses that just felt like you were looking at things. But when they roll out of focus, they roll out of focus really beautifully. And as you can see in that background, there's no hard edges. There's no real detail. It's just very, very soft and diffuse. I describe it like I'm looking through a window with water running down it. There's just no structure to the image at all. And then if we look down here, we can actually see it roll out of focus. And I just love the way it rolls out of focus. It's got a very kind of dreamy, ethereal quality to it. And one DP told me these lenses roll out of focus very quickly. I'm getting ahead of myself. I actually have a chart that shows that they do. So one of the things that affects the out of focus quality of an image, it's spherical aberration. Now, we talk about bokeh typically in the form of highlights. What is a highlight doing? But bokeh is really everything in the background of an image. So if you have perfectly corrected bokeh, then the disc, those highlight discs that you see are perfectly evenly illuminated. Overcorrected or undercorrected, you get either the donut at the top or you get what my colleagues in Germany call the Christmas ball, the Christmas ornament. The undercorrected Christmas ball actually looks really nice because it blends very beautifully, very soft edges. The overcorrected donut tends to preserve textures in an image and it feels a lot harder. Now, the problem is you can't have the Christmas ball without the donut. They go together. So if one's in front of the point of focus, the other one will be behind it. Perfectly corrected, that will be consistent all the way through the image. And that's what we went for, but we went for it to a degree that I've never seen before in a lens. So here's the difference. Lens on the left, we've got the donut. And you can see there's a lot of texture in that image. And it's interesting, and this is actually kind of a very vintage lens look. So if you wanted this vintage look, you could have it. And this is actually a lens that's in production now. And it's kind of interesting. And you can see the numbers on the mailbox. I can still read those on the lens on the left. On the lens on the right, the signature prime, can't really read them at all. It's a very, very, very smooth image. The background, all the textures blend together. And this happens even if I stop down. Now, all the little highlights in the background are smaller now. The donuts have cleaned up a little bit on the lens on the left, but there's still a lot going on. And the signature prime, there's a lot less going on. And this is, there's a theory I have, and I actually shot this image at this stop to see if it was true. I feel like I can get more separation out of a signature prime because even if they go out of focus just a little bit, they get really smooth really fast. So they don't technically blur more, but they blur more smoothly. Now, this is the chart I shot when a DP told me these roll out of focus really fast because I wanted to see what that meant. So this is a distortion chart. Normally you shoot it flat on, and it's for mapping lens distortions for visual effects. I shot it at an angle because I wanted to see how things rolled in and out of focus. And I shot 3 other lenses by comparison, and here they are, organized in degree of bokeh hardness. The signature prime is the softest. I'd say the second lens down. You know, it's almost as soft, but not quite. And the bottom 2 lenses are actually quite hard. And one of them surprised me. I'll name the third one down because it's not in production anymore. At least not, I mean, this is a Cookspeed Panchro rehoused, so it's probably 60 or 70 years old. There's a new version of that that's been released, but that's not the one I tested. This is an original Cookspeed Panchro. And I used to shoot a lot of commercials with this. I used to be a DP. And I'm used to thinking of this as a very soft lens. But the way it rolls out of focus, it holds a lot of detail for a long time. So there does seem to be something to this, that there are a lot of lenses that feel a bit harder and roll out of focus a bit more slowly. And signature primes tend to soften a lot faster. And there's kind of a little isolated view. And what I really want to show you is that, you know, we've got the donut bokeh on the bottom 3 on the right. But of course, we always have the Christmas ornament on the left, and the effect of that is this. So you can see the ones on the bottom, the 3 on the bottom are actually softer than the signature prime. But that comes at a price. The other side is going to be harder. And you almost never see the Christmas ball on the far side of focus. And that's where it really shines. I've seen a couple of lenses that do that, and they're beautiful. But I almost never see that. It's almost always the donut bokeh on the far side of focus. And then this is the functional, this is the proof. I shot this on a 280 at T11. I don't really see any background textures there that have a hard edge to them. There's still a lot of separation there. And I really like this because I like this shot because she feels like she's on one plane. It feels like everything else is kind of on another plane. And in a way, it's almost like a bad 3D effect. Like when they take a 2D movie and they make it into 3D and everyone looks like a cutout. And in 3D, that looks really strange. In 2D, I actually really like it because I feel more of the depth. And I know where to look because she's clear. And there's nothing really in the background for my eye to grab onto. And once again, that water running down the window effect comes to mind. It just, the backgrounds have this very dreamy effect that I just find really pleasing. All right, let's talk about flares. We didn't want to get rid of flares. People like flares, but we wanted to make them friendly. And in HDR, you're going to see a lot of things in lens flares that you didn't know existed. Lens flares in HDR tend to be very colorful and very bright. So what we tried to do was create an HDR-friendly lens flare that's a little bit softer, a little less saturated. We didn't want to take flares away, but when you see them, they shouldn't draw your eye as strongly as they might otherwise. Because in Rec. 709, flares never get that bright because the displays don't get that bright. But when in HDR, when highlights, you know, a big specular highlight is going to be 3 or 4 stops brighter on your TV than you saw before in Rec. 709 in HD, it can be really distracting. So we gave it a little bit of a glow to take the hard edges off. And actually, I should show you, sorry, I should go back a second. If you're wide open, you'll see the glow. And if you're closed down, you'll start to see a sunburst effect. And then you can get a combination of that if you go halfway. This is about 5/6. But what's interesting is that if you notice, by the time you get out to her hand on the surfboard, there's no flare anymore. So we try to isolate the flares. There's a lot of lenses that if you shoot into the sun like that, they're going to bring every shadow up. And we tried to prevent that from happening. We want to give you a flare, but we want to keep it localized. So you still have some control over it. Now, this is a little example of the glow. This is a lamp I bought at IKEA that we put in our studio at Erie in Burbank. And I shot it one day, and I thought, oh, this is a great example. Because you can see where you see the bulb through the shade, there's a little bit of a glow. It takes a little bit of the edge off. But by the time you get out to the edge of the shade, it's gone. It's very localized. So it's just like shooting through just a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of a white diffusion filter, just a whisper, just to take the edge off. Because in HDR, and especially as displays get better and better and better, we kind of want to make the subject look good, and we want to give you the opportunity to include things in the frame that make the frame interesting without necessarily upstaging the action. So that's the sun. You can't really see where the sun is necessarily. You know it's there, but it's not a hard clipped ball. We didn't want that. We wanted to create a smooth glow that kind of blossomed. And this is sort of what we do with highlights in our camera anyways. Our highlight roll-off is really, really, really good. You don't typically see a classic clipped highlight in any of our Arri cameras. And part of that is our tone mapping, the way we roll off those highlights. This is the same idea, just trying to smooth those highlights, not only to work better with our own cameras, but you can get this effect on any camera. Now let's talk about distortion. This is a 15 millimeter prime. That shadow you see at the bottom left of frame is the front of the lens. Now, what I'll point out is the bokeh on this lens it's an exact match for the 280 that I showed you earlier. The bokeh on all our lenses is exactly the same. But that's how far she was. 19 inches from the sensor, about an inch in front of the lens. And there is no obvious distortion that I can see. These lenses are really, really well corrected for distortion. There's no more than 1% on any of the lenses, and that includes the 12 millimeter, which is even wider than this one. It's a really interesting kind of beauty because you can do shots like this on a 15 millimeter, 5 feet away from someone. They don't look so bad, but you get lots of perspective. And actually, I can see the focus roll off on the surfboard, which is really interesting. About halfway between her body and the edge of the frame, the surfboard starts kind of blurring, or it's got a really interesting focus roll off quality. It's really hard to describe, almost like a smear. And then here's an example just of the rectilinearity, how straight the lines are. You don't see barrel distortion or pincushion distortion. All the lines are just straight. You see perspective, but there's no obvious defect to the lens. And it's a kind of a beauty that I don't see in lenses very often. And then at the long lens, or at the long end, this is the 280. Typically on a lens like this, instead of barrel distortion that you'd see on wide-angle lenses, you would see pincushion distortion. And there's nothing here. And I love this image because every time I look at it, I see something new. I love looking at all these little balconies and seeing what's going on. You can just see it so clearly. So this is a little focus breathing test that I shot. Now this is a torture test, so it really wasn't fair to the other lens, but still, it makes the point. This is 14 inches to 20 inches. It's a rack focus. So you can see the breathing, a little bit of a size change there, and then here's the signature prime. So it's a very different experience. So these lenses are very, very, very well corrected for focus breathing. And a big part of that is because we want the beauty of the lens to be more about presenting what's in front of the lens and presenting it in the best possible light without jumping up and down and saying, hey, it's all about me. The images you make should not be all about the lens. The lens should help you, but we don't feel like it should become the star. So let's talk about LPL, because we had to come up with a new lens mount to make these lenses. And the reason we came up with a new lens mount is because mechanical shutters, which are part of what the PL mount is designed around, that's a leftover from film. We don't have mechanical shutters anymore. But they force us to push the lens mount out from the sensor because we have to leave room for that shutter. That's just part of the PL spec. So we decided, well, why are we still doing this? Let's do what all the still camera manufacturers are doing and move the lens closer to the sensor, because that makes optical design, well, I wouldn't say easier. It makes it easier to make really high performance lenses when you do that. And that's what we're about as a company, is we go for the high performance end of the spectrum. So we changed the mount to shrink the flange depth, but we also made it wider. Just to show you, a lot of people think this is an area only lens mount. It's not. Here's an Alexa LF. Here's a red Monstro. Here's a Sony Venice. Here's a red Helium. Here's a red Gemini. You can get mounts for all of these. We don't make third-party mounts, but there are third-party manufacturers that do. And these lenses are designed to work with any camera and with any sensor size up to full frame. So they're not an area exclusive lens, and the LPL mount is not area exclusive. We actually give the design away for free to anyone who wants to make the mount. So this is what I was describing earlier. So PL left room for that mechanical shutter, and it's designed really just optimally for a lens that will light up a 35mm film frame and not do much more. LPL does that. Moves the mount closer, makes the mount wider. Now, why do we do that? Well, so if you're looking at the rear element on a PL mount lens, the amount of real estate available to you when you push the lens out that far isn't very much, and that's where you do a lot of correction of various distortion. There's also a cover glass and an optical low-pass filter and an IR cut filter all stacked in front of the sensor, and those are optical elements. Together they affect everything about how the sensor sees light through the lens. Now, if light comes straight through those filters, then it's going through one thickness of glass. If it goes through at an angle, it's going through more glass. And that tends to affect how the light refracts. It also causes it to disperse, so it separates into different colors. You get color fringing, things like that at the edge of the frame. We wanted to find a way to eliminate that, because if you want that, there's plenty of lens options out there. But if you don't want that, there aren't that many. Lastly, at the bottom of every photosite, there's a little photodiode. And if you focus light such that it doesn't hit dead on that photodiode, you're going to lose exposure. So we wanted to fix that too. So what we did was we made our lenses near telecentric. What that means is light comes out of the back of the lens as close to dead on to the sensor as possible. We moved the lens closer to the sensor so we have more real estate to work with at the back of the lens. And then we hit that photodiode dead on. We figured this is going to work with any foreseeable future sensor design. And that's part of what we do, is we try to make our cameras and our accessories and our lenses as future-proof as possible. We don't want them to be short-term investments because they're expensive, but they're high quality and they should last a long time. So the way you can see if a lens is telecentric or not is you look in the back of the lens and you see where the exit pupil is, and that's the image of the aperture through the back of the lens. And on signature primes, on the mid-range ones, it looks like it's almost in front of the lens. That's because light, when it exits the lens, it thinks it's coming from deeper in the lens. So the light rays at the edges come out more parallel to the sensor. So the closer the aperture is to the back of the lens, the more you're straining at the edges to light up a large format frame, especially through a PL mount, because PL was never really meant to do that. Now, if you wanted to put a PL mount lens onto an Arri camera, which, the Mini LF comes with LPL, and our camera that we're releasing next year, the Super 35 4K camera, will have an LPL mount as well. You need to use an adapter. The adapter is bulletproof. It's really solid, and it also has an interesting side effect. The actual PL mount has a little bit of a cutout in the back that will shadow the sensor. So if you are using an LPL mount on another camera or on our camera, and you've got a lens, if you're using a PL mount lens on a camera with an LPL mount on it, you will get more coverage than you will through a traditional PL mount. So that's it for me. If you have any questions, please get in touch. My email address is lenses@arri.com. My name is Art Adams. I'm Cinema Lens Specialist for Arri. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Art and Arri. We're going to cut to break real quick, but stay tuned. We're about to get into some camera movement, real exciting discussion upon that. But right before that, we're about to do raffle giveaway. So I hope you put your tickets in, stay tuned, and stick around.
Working with C-stands has been a dream.
I mean, we could punch in a little
Heart's racing.
All right, sorry.
About to be a vibe, he says.
Like, what's something that you wish you would have already known, or like...
I would keep my phone in my hands.
When I first came here at Ohio HD, I knew like literally nothing about industry standard equipment or just equipment in general. So my couple months here has been amazing, just learning all of the different names and the terminology for different equipment.
I wanted the experience of shooting in a professional space. This was my chance to do that, and that's something I think that is really valuable about this internship.
I think the things that's really going to stick with all of us are the industry norms that go into producing anything as far as professional etiquette, how to handle yourself on a set.
I feel like I've learned how to get myself involved, how to take charge of what I want to learn and what I want to know and how I'm going to be useful. You know, those sort of, you don't think to do that in school just because you're a student. Everything is sort of like, okay, here you go. Whereas like here, if there's something you want to do, then you have to go for it yourself. And I think that's true of real life. You have to want to do those things.
Taking all the stuff that I've learned from here, I'll be able to pass down a lot of information that I found useful. We're a big community. I think it's really important to like stay connected, and it's pretty cool to just have that here within a space.
My favorite memories have been like the times that we as interns have gotten together and like hung out, whether we're getting lunch or just like talking and like shooting ideas back and forth. Like everyone has like so many like cool ideas and like good things to say.
Development. They're not just here to like let us run loose and like say that they did an internship to like boost their commercial appeal. They actually care about developing young creatives and helping them get their footing in the industry. And that showed because they were curious to find out how much we knew, and they were also excited to tell us more.
At the end of it, like it's worth it, and it's been such a cool experience to like look back and see how far we've come and not even want it to end. Like I kind of just want to stay here and be an intern instead of going back to school, but like, you know.
Bolt is a 6-axis camera robot that is very fast, very precise, and is infinitely repeatable.
Precise repeatable motion creates opportunities in shots that you would not be able to get traditionally.
A lot of the shots that we've done can sometimes almost look like they're a virtual shot because you're not used to thinking that a physical camera can get to the places this arm can put it.
If you had a similar product that you wanted the same move on, say 150 flavors of a soda, you'd be able to do that exact same move and cut them one after the other without having to do any kind of tracking, any kind of realignment. It would be frame accurate and perfect every time. Additionally, we have the ability to add triggers and actuators that allow us to control how things interact while the camera is moving.
So we have a series of servo motors that can be controlling focus, iris zoom,
as well as external triggers such as a drink pour or an ice drop or a light bulb turning on.
When you're bringing a Bolt to the set, you're not just bringing operators of machinery. You're bringing the expertise and the commitment of the entire Ohio HD team to your set.
Hi, David here. Come on down to the Ohio HD Gear Show, March 12th, 2020! All of our friends are going to be there. Arri, Electrosonic, MAGSTOR, Sony, Blueshade, Central Ohio AV, Fujifilm, Westcott, Inner Circle, Canon, and many more! If you're a media professional, or just looking for an excuse to visit, then this show is for you! We also have t-shirts. Yay!
Oh, great. Like I needed a reason to hang out with a bunch of sweaty video nerds all day.
What I don't understand is, what's with the puppets?
Puppets? What?
Well, so come on down to the Ohio HD Gear Show. It's gonna be great!
Everybody, we are back. Just a friendly reminder, please keep washing your hands, do those elbow bumps. But along with that, we have our next demonstration from KinoFlow with Sam. So Sam, why don't you come up here and take it away?
Thank you very much. Hey guys. So today I have two things that I want to show. I kind of want to show like a quick firmware update that we've done to our units, as well as a small presentation. It's a quick presentation, but it's kind of an introduction up to, well, not an introduction, but how color gamuts and color space, you know, you should really know what you're working with before you actually approach a project. So if we can we roll the presentation? Or do I have to click it? Oh, okay, there you go. So the first slide is going to be of a test made by Jeff Boyle. He's a CML DP that he does like tests, and he talks a lot about like color science behind cameras and how to approach films. And it just a comparison between tungstens and LEDs and how they work with different cameras. So it's a test of 7 different cameras with tungstens and LEDs. So here it is the Alexa on the tungsten. And then it should be the Alexa with the LED. That's tungsten, it's LED. This is a C200 with tungsten, and then with the LED. There you go with tungsten and LED and so on. All the tests are just kind of showing you how how LEDs change from tungsten on the same cameras. So the LED colorimetry for the cinema, the presentation is just kind of understanding the color gamuts and how LEDs play with different other instruments like the cameras, the monitors, the television sets, and so on. So understanding the white light, the spectrum that the white light has, and how they work better than just dialing in a gel on a particular light instrument. So going into it, the older equipment, like the old tungstens, carbon arcs, fluorescents, they all have a better white spectrum, so you get a little bit better colors from the older fixtures. Where now as LED, you have to make sure that you're working with a correct white light in order to get like the best out of the project that you're working on. So gamuts refer to the entire range of colors available on a particular device, such as a cinema camera, lighting fixtures, projectors, and monitors. And every instrument here has its own color gamut. So they all have to be kind of synchronized in order to show what you're trying to produce as far as like your project. So this is kind of like a quick show of like the Rec 709, and the center is actually the white light point. So also known as the planking curve or the black body curve, or where the white is. It's gonna be like a planking curve. I'm sorry. So it's the green one is the 709. That's what captures in that gamut. The P3 is the blue triangle, and the Rec 2020 is the yellow triangle. So the Rec 2020 obviously captures a little bit more colors. And then the other one is the ACES, which ACES is kind of like what your eye sees as far as the color spectrum. Digital cameras can capture very wide color space. The gamuts of cinema cameras can vary. This combination of spectral sensitivity outlines the challenges of spectral matching. So every camera sensor has a different way of viewing colors. And that's kind of important because a lot of them are on Rec 709, some are on, these are all the different camera sensors and how they view their color gamuts. So they all have their own way of approaching colors. KinoFlow has a color gamut. This is KinoFlow's color gamut. 3 points is the RGB, and you can capture any colors within that spectrum. The Rec 709 is within the KinoFlow color gamut, and also P3 is a little bit in there, but we are lacking on some of the greens, just on the richer greens, the saturated greens. But we are going to fix that by just moving the green a little bit over to capture that gamut as well. And Rec 2020 is ultimately the goal to go. That would kind of allow you to get the HDR camera gamuts and so on. RGB color points define the range of the gamut. The full spectrum white LED defines the white response of the fixture. So full white LED is common to all of the gamuts, which is the center there. And there's supposed to be like a curved line, which is supposed to be the black body curve. As long as you have like a great white light, then you'll be able to, do like add subtractive gels, and capture any one of those colors easily just by using gels. So gels, even though we have gels in our firmware, gels are still relative because there are some colors that LED fixtures cannot reproduce. And with that, you can just add a gel. I'll show a small clip of it later on. That's the black body curve there. As long as you can capture within the black body curve, you have like a great fixture. Full spectrum white ensures the best skin tone reproduction. Full spectrum white will also illuminate and reflect colors that fall outside of the camera or the display gamut, as I was saying earlier. And let me see. So color points that can not be reproduced by additive RGB mixing displays through. So that green point at the outer end of the 2020 gamut cannot be reproduced by some of the fixtures. Like our fixture cannot reproduce that, but then that's when you would add the gel and you will be able to reproduce that gamut. This type of color generation is referred to as subtractive color rendering, which is the gels. White Kelvin has a broad spectrum distribution. Adding, subtracting gel colors at 3200, 5500 may achieve color points that additive mixing RGB may not. So again, the gels would only be able to go up to wherever you have that gamut set. So whatever your monitor is, if it's at 709, it would only be able to go up to 709. It would not be able to reproduce colors outside of the gamut like 2020 because the monitor is set to 709. Gels still serve a purpose. And so the test that we ran was that it was on an Alexa, and it was actually it was one of the film schools in California that did this test. So they dialed in 2900 on the camera, and they were using an LED light, and this is what they came out with. Then they put a lead gel on the LED light, and this is what they came out with. So then they put 2900 on the LED fixture. They dialed in 2900, and the camera was set on 2900. This is what they came out with. And then when they added the Lee 101 onto the fixture, and the camera was dialed to 2900, this is what they came out with. So when they dialed in the yellow, the Lee 101 into the fixture, and kept the camera at 2900, this is what they came out with. And the reason for that is because of the sensor camera is native to the 6500 chip. So what they did, they dialed back the camera to 6500, and they came out with this. So it's important to kind of test before you actually move on to certain colors, because the camera may not see it the way your eye sees it. So it's the perception, it's not there with the camera. So you have to test before you shoot it, and that's why also gels are important to use with LEDs as well. KinoFlow. The KinoFlow has added camera LUTs, which is camera profiles to the pictures. And you have 4 different cameras right now, which is the 4 most popular film cameras. And you can actually just change through the color gamuts or camera profiles, and you'll be able to match that central sensitivity curve of that color chip, of the sensor chip. And then you have X, Y, and RGB as well, which allows you to reach some of the gamuts that aren't. But in summary, as long as you have a great white light, and that's kind of what's most important, and that's what we try to push more. So we have 2 LED chips, which is 1 tungsten, 1 daylight, and then the RGB. So you're not dependent on the daylight or a tungsten to make daylight or tungsten with the RGB. And then, again, gels are still pretty relevant. And then in conclusion, you're still supposed to choose out your paintbrushes, in this case, the pictures, as the old artists use pigments, and kind of just do tests and make sure that everything works well with what you guys are doing. It says, just as Rembrandt and Vernier chose their pigments carefully, today cinematographers must choose their spectral palettes carefully. And good broad spectrum white light goes a long way solving colors and rendering. And that's kind of the end of that. And I just wanted to show here the differences of the cameras. So when you go into the camera LUTs or the camera profiles, you can see the differences in the light because the green and magenta is shifted so it can match that camera sensor. Again, so this is Panasonic, Panavision, Sony Venice, the Alexa. Venice, the Panavision, and Panasonic. Another thing that I wanted to show was the color space. But in the color space, you have to be in a certain color. So let's say we choose like a gel, like a dark salmon, and then you can choose through the different color spaces. It changes dramatically because of the color gamuts that you're using. You're only limited to that certain light. And that's kind of like the main basic points I want to touch by. And you could also run these off batteries, which is the SL. We use block batteries, which is SL 100. But yeah, if you have any questions or anything, just please come by and ask me. I'm right outside the area here. Okay? All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Sam. And Kino Flow, you guys are great. We're going to cut to break real quick, and right after that, we are going to actually be doing the raffle in 15 minutes, around 7 for sure. So stick around if you want some free stuff and maybe put some tickets in the raffle. Stick by. See you soon.
Working with C-stands has been a dream.
I mean, we could punch in a little
Heart's racing.
All right, sorry.
About to be a vibe, he says.
Like, what's something that you wish you would have already known, or like...
I would keep my phone in my hands.
When I first came here at Ohio HD, I knew like literally nothing about industry standard equipment or just equipment in general. So my couple months here has been amazing, just learning all of the different names and the terminology for different equipment.
I wanted the experience of shooting in a professional space. This was my chance to do that, and that's something I think that is really valuable about this internship.
I think the things that's really going to stick with all of us are the industry norms that go into producing anything as far as professional etiquette, how to handle yourself on a set.
I feel like I've learned how to get myself involved, how to take charge of what I want to learn and what I want to know and how I'm going to be useful. You know, you don't think to do that in school just because you're a student. Everything is sort of like, okay, here you go. Whereas like here, if there's something you want to do, then you have to go for it yourself. And I think that's true of real life. You have to want to do those things.
Taking all the stuff that I've learned from here, I'll be able to pass down a lot of information that I found useful. We're a big community. I think it's really important to like stay connected, and it's pretty cool to just have that here within a space.
My favorite memories have been like the times that we as interns have gotten together and like hung out, whether we're getting lunch or just like talking and like shooting ideas back and forth. Like everyone has like so many like cool ideas and like good things to say.
Development. They're not just here to like let us run loose and like say that they did an internship to like boost their commercial appeal. They actually care about developing young creatives and helping them get their footing in the industry. And that showed because they were curious to find out how much we knew, and they were also excited to tell us more.
At the end of it, like it's worth it, and it's been such a cool experience to like look back and see how far we've come and not even want it to end. Like I kind of just want to stay here and be an intern instead of going back to school, but like, you know.
The Bolt is a 6-axis camera robot that is very fast, very precise, and is infinitely repeatable.
Precise repeatable motion creates opportunities in shots that you would not be able to get traditionally.
A lot of the shots that we've done can sometimes almost look like they're a virtual shot because you're not used to thinking that a physical camera can get to the places this arm can put it.
If you had a similar product that you wanted the same move on, say 150 flavors of a soda, you'd be able to do that exact same move and cut them one after the other without having to do any kind of tracking, any kind of realignment. It would be frame accurate and perfect every time. Additionally, we have the ability to add triggers and actuators that allow us to control how things interact while the camera is moving.
So we have a series of servo motors that can be controlling focus, iris zoom,
as well as external triggers, such as a drink pour or an ice drop or a light bulb turning on.
When you're bringing a Bolt to the set, you're not just bringing operators of machinery. You're bringing the expertise and the commitment of the entire Ohio HD team to your set.
David here. Come on down to the Ohio HD Gear Show, March 12th, 2020! All of our friends are going to be there. Arri, Electrosonic, MAGSTOR, Sony, Blueshade, Central Ohio AV, Fujifilm, Westcott, Inner Circle, Canon, and many more! If you're a media professional, or just looking for an excuse to visit, then this show is for you! We also have t-shirts. Yay!
Oh, great. Like I needed a reason to hang out with a bunch of sweaty video nerds all day.
What I don't understand is, what's with the puppets?
Puppets? What?
So come on down to the Ohio HD Gear Show. It's gonna be great!
Welcome back to the Ohio HD 2020 Gear Show. Woo woo! Yeah! All right. To start off things, we're gonna do a little raffle. So hopefully y'all got your tickets in here today. So the first thing that we are going to be raffling off is a Gemini 1x1 light panel, and that is sponsored by Vitech. So thank you, Vitech, to whoever's about to get this nice raffle tickets. Let's see. All right. We have the number 178227. And on the back of that, we have Juanita Andrade. So if you seeing this, we will call you. We'll give you a text. We'll let you know you got a cool light panel. So thank you, Vitech, for that. With that, yes. Beautiful. And next thing we have on our raffle, we have two more little objects here. And next thing we have Thunderbolt 3 cable. Thank you, MAGSTOR. So, can I get a drum roll, please? Tummy roll, whatever's good. Thank you. The number is 178247. And, So that number or that person is Nick Sutton. Aha, Nick, we will get to you after this. So Nick's got that. And then last but not least, raffle prize of today, we have a waterproof soft battery bag. Thank you, Block Battery. Wonderful, fantastic. All right, and for that, the last raffle of the day, we go, do-do-do, 178239. William Allen. William Allen, if you could, at some point, I'll get to you. I know you. I see your face. I see you. Woo! You get a nice Block Battery, waterproof battery case. So congratulations. And on to the main event, the last event of the night, the most anticipated, maybe, depending on who you are. Trending camera movements. So why don't we just take it away with Tim? Go for it.
All right. First of all, I'd like to thank Scott and the entire crew here at Ohio HD again for another great gear show, especially during the apocalypse. I think that's kind of amazing that you were able to pull it off. I was just kind of thinking this is probably the last event any of us are going to be at for a while, if you've been keeping up with the news. So enjoy it. Hopefully we'll be able to go out with a bang a little bit tonight. Yeah, we're going to talk about camera movement, so why don't we, let's see, did I have anything else besides that? Nope. Introductions. Let's start down there. I'm Tim Corliss, local DP and sort of video guy around, and so we'll just start down at that end and come back to me. How about that?
I'm Scott Myers. I'm the VP of Production and the Senior Director of Photography for the Strategy Group Company and Brick Editorial Boutique and Studio.
Corey Neighbors, kind of freelance, handy person, but also stepping into Director of Photography stuff as well.
I'm Casey Hunter. I'm an employee here at Ohio HD, one of the bold ops, often in AC or DIT as well.
Gordon Lash. I'm from Brainstorm Media and also AGL Equipment. AGL Equipment's a rental company that I own.
My name's TJ Boster, freelance jib op and DP.
I'm David Jeffries. I am a Bolt Cine operator. This is pretty hollow. And also here at Ohio HD.
All right, thanks guys. So Casey, you've got 43 minutes, so take it away.
1, 2.
See you at the bar.
Anyway, okay, do I have my graphic available that I gave somebody?
I love that we're all just staring at the screen.
Yeah, we're staring at the screen. It's kind of
We're
weird.
all just-
There it is. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to start out with some. This is a little funny because the Facebook video I had wouldn't go up. But anyway, so this is what we all learned, like in film school, if you went to film school or just studied film with books or whatever. So back in the day, right, all the camera movement guides. I like this though, the client camera movement guide down there at the bottom, if you know. And I literally, that is true. Have you guys experienced that? I literally have, clients that say pan when it's just funny. So a little bit of levity there, very little. So we'll move on. Facebook video would have been awesome. Anyway, okay, so I wanted to kind of start out, guys, with just some foundational questions, right? So I thought we'd start talking about why do we move the camera? What are some good reasons to move the camera? And are there good reasons not to move the camera? Who wants to start?
Screw it. To me, the answer is always it depends, right? Okay. So if you're trying to create emotion or you're trying to follow a subject, right? So the film is made up of all these different components, right? Whether what's on screen, how you light it, all these things. So camera movement is one of those variables that help you tell a story, right? So if you need a long sweeping shot, why are you trying to do this? Why are you panning with somebody? Start there. Start with the dependence and how it helps the story, and then everything else kind of follows.
Yep, anybody else?
I can follow up with what camera motion is not acceptable. And that's whenever using a handheld camera is just the default position, right? So especially, I don't know if there's any students out there right now, but what I see so many times I can't even think is just handheld because you didn't want to take the time to set up a tripod. I would encourage you not to do that in any case. If you're shooting handheld, which is a perfectly viable and awesome way to shoot, have a reason for it. You know, it's got to be a reason that you're shooting handheld, right? That's it.
That was actually my fourth question, and I only have 4 foundational questions.
I like to jump ahead, Tim.
Man. Anybody else want to chime in?
We still have 41 minutes.
I know.
So
Casey hasn't said squat, so I don't know what's going to happen here.
Well, one thing I kind of like is to be able to do revealing shots. So you introduce new elements as you move, and it kind of opens up the mind of the viewer, draws them into the screen, and it just kind of, you know, it's a way of sucking in their attention. I think, you know, the other way is to use movement that's already in motion. Say you're shooting on a conveyor belt or something like that, to use that motion. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the camera moving. Sometimes it's your subject.
Right, okay, subject movement. And I think both of you guys are talking a little bit about what I would call motivated camera movement, right? So does the story motivate it? Or if you're just, you know, a lot of us would shoot corporate or spots, music videos, things like that. So a lot of times I think with music videos, it seems like just camera movement's eye candy and it's cool, it's fun. That's where a lot of camera movement seems to sort of, you know, catch on, originate. In spots, it's the same thing. You're just trying to get people's attention through all the, you know, there's just a lot of noise out there and you want people to look at your visuals. But if you're doing a narrative or a doc, you know, a little more long form, maybe you would think a little bit more about the movement just to make sure it is motivated. There's a reason for it, you know. Story is kind of, you know, asking for it. Everybody seen 1917? Everybody, yeah. So that's an obvious, you know, I don't know, it's sort of it's a trick in a sense, people might say, but boy, I thought it really was awesome and, you know, fit the story. It was pretty amazing. So the camera never stops, basically, so it's, you know, I thought that was pretty awesome. It's starting to feel like a Between Two Ferns episode. That was, yeah. Do we need? So another question was, do we need good reasons or just because it's cool?
You know, I think there's a certain amount of what you were saying. Like we have to cut through the noise of what everything else is going on out there. So I think big part of it is sometimes, yeah, you know, it's okay to move the camera because it looks cool. That's the motivation itself. There is how can we make it so that I can keep an audience's attention. You know, I think on top of that, we can also kind of look at using camera movement as a way to help build the story in itself. So not necessarily the story driving the camera movement, but the camera movement driving the story. So not to just immediately dump into the robot, but we can do a lot of things with the robot that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. That precise, repeatable motion where we can then build assets over top of it, where we maybe have, you know, multiple donuts in a box that we move on. So yeah, we've caught the eye candy of the movement, but we're also able to tell a story of the dozen donuts that are getting put into this box, or whatever that story might be, but we're able to tell a story a different way because we can move the camera.
Right, and I think that is interesting, because I always thought in terms of motivated camera movement, so the story, the script would motivate the movement, but with the Bolt, and we'll get to talk a little bit more about text a little bit later, but I noticed, like Scott, when you guys did the recent commercial here with the Bolt, I came in and watched a little bit. You guys knew you wanted to use that and kind of wrote to it, right?
Yeah, we actually wrote the script for the use of that technology.
Right.
And sometimes it is okay that it's just cool looking. We knew we were doing a spot. 90% of what I do is political messaging advertising. So we were doing a spot for a candidate up in Michigan that we knew he was buying Super Bowl time. Okay, so already that bar is set fairly high, even though it's a locally rolled in spot only for the Grand Rapids market. It has to compete with everything else that you see during the Super Bowl, right? So we said, hey, this is a great opportunity. We can use this new technology. We wanted to try it anyway. And the director wrote this spot specifically to use the Bolt. And if you think that camera motion doesn't matter, between the exposure on the Super Bowl and the excellent execution by the team here, he jumped 40 points in the polls as a result of that spot. So in the world of politics, that's an almost unheard of jump based on one message. So yeah, it absolutely matters, and it was fun. It was great.
It's just a very unique for me, it just kind of hit me that, normally the script motivates the movement. There you had the movement motivating the script in a sense, which is, pretty cool. And certainly for, like we said, for spots and stuff, that makes total sense. When you're planning your shoots, those of you who shoot, now some of you guys are on the tech end and some of you DP and so forth. I don't know exactly who. When you're planning a shoot, are you thinking in terms of camera movement, or a lot of times when it's just B-roll and you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants, is it just like, this would be cool, Or how much in other words, I guess the question is, how much of it is that? How much is kind of on the spot thinking, and how much of it is pre-planned?
A lot of it depends on, is there a site survey involved, or are you just kind of walking in going, hey, what are we doing, A lot of it also is lensing. Is it something where you're going to want to try and keep a really tight focus, but they don't have budget for a lot of personnel on the crew? Well, then you're going to need to think of your movement in a different way. A lot of times people just throw a gimbal at it, which is the current trend because everybody's got a gimbal and you can get motion instantly with them, and then they'll use something wide where everything's in focus. So I think it's a matter of, how prepared are you, how much of a script is there, how much of a, has it been storyboarded? Have they, thought of the imagery ahead of time?
Right.
My experience in shooting is that as soon as you add any kind of camera motion, if it's on a slider or a gimbal or a jib, it automatically brings everybody into focus as to what you're doing. So for me, it is cutting through the noise and the clutter. It is providing a little bit of eye candy, but it's also adding money to your production. Like immediately, as soon as somebody sees the camera move, they're like, oh, wow, camera's moving. This looks like a movie. And the client factor is like significant. And then you start saying, well, okay, they love that. Let's do that again. Let's do that again. Let's do that again. On the other side, the time factor, especially if you're working very quickly, you have to know when to hit those shots, right? So if you know you're going to have 7 locations in a day, chances are, depending on your time schedule, you're not going to be able to do camera motion on all of those. But plan ahead and say, hey, at this location and this location, we're definitely moving the camera because that's going to be the most payoff. So as you're doing your pre-production, think about those applications. But I'll tell you what, the client impact is real, and the audience impact is real anytime you move the camera.
Yep. And Scott, you talked a little bit about inappropriate camera movement being the handheld. Is it, so when it comes to the greater idea of camera movement, what is too much?
When you do it just to do it, right? So the first example that really comes to mind, because the shots and the content is really fascinating, but it's overdone, especially in terms of like EDM concert. There's not a lot of stuff going on that stage, so the camera operator's trying to make a lot of excitement, and sometimes it's done way too much. Guys just up there like throwing like a hatchet around and cutting it together, and while you want to have those wow moments, you also need to have that lull, right? You need to pull in and pull out. So when you're just doing movement to kind of go, hey, look, I'm a cool cam op, chances are you're probably doing too much.
I think too, what kind of makes me laugh, like gimbals are such a thing now that movement's so easy. And one of the things that kind of gets to me sometimes is like the movement of I'm going to move 3 feet one way, and then a split second, I'm not going to hold on that. I'm just going to move right back. And I see that so much in video today because, people can run around with something as big as this mic and get that movement that makes it feel more cinematic, but then they're doing these things that just kind of, it's like it looks good for a half a second, and then they pull it back, and then it's like, oh, so you're just doing this because it kind of looks okay, and you haven't really thought about it. It's just this like idea that you're coming on with a fly type of thing.
Yeah, more like it's justifying the technology and having that on set instead of driving the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think so much about it that often gets missed as DPs. You have to think about the edit. Right. You have to think about how is this camera movement going to cut into the next piece. And I think, especially in younger folks, there's a huge, almost fear to let the camera be still. Like to establish a shot that has depth to it, to establish a shot that's well framed. And I think, sometimes movement is used as a crutch more than an actual tool.
And it's not just young people. I'm an old guy, and I know when I started switching to small cameras with internal body stabilization, I started looking at my footage. I was working on my own personal doc, and I started looking at it. I'm like, holy crap, I feel like I suck, because I used to be a good cameraman. What's wrong with me? And I just felt like I was leaning on that. And because I now had it, I wasn't stopping. It was constantly moving, and it was kind of frustrating myself. I really had to learn that lesson, too. It's just sometimes we do get sucked in because it's there, And it's real easy to fall.
I mean,
and
we're a
kind of do that.
lot of gear nerds, so that doesn't help that problem.
Exactly. Yep.
Also depends on what you're doing. So we've talked a lot about like the film, the music video, but if you go into live events, broadcasts, concerts, that kind of stuff. So I do a lot of jib op for concerts, Major League Gaming when it was in town, and it's adding part to the story. So I had some directors that just wanted to let it breathe, right, just to kind of introduce for coming into gameplay or these kind of things. And then I have directors that would switch, and they need something exciting. They want to come back in a flash. So I'm constantly searching, auditioning for shots that will fit that mold. So in a broadcast live situation where you are the camera movement, you might always be kind of just searching for that wow shot to give to your director, because at that point you're basically this asset for your director. So I want to show my director all the assets and tools I have, so then they can choose. Hey, I need this kind of action shot. Cool, I can dial it up for you. So we always talk about the film world, but the broadcast world's a little bit more, what can you do on the spot? So being able to know how to move that fast and to do that is definitely an asset.
Right, and you're still shooting for the edit. It's just an instant edit.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah. So let's shift a little bit, because we kind of talked about when to use it, when not, all that stuff, sort of foundational ideas or philosophy or whatever you want to call it. Shift to talking about tech and some of the options that are out there. I kind of divided them up into two things: traditional tech, and I put those in like dollies, sliders, car mounts, jibs, handheld would be one, and Steadicam, things that have been around at least 40, 50, 60, and beyond years, How much of that kind of tech do you guys employ?
I still see a little bit of every one of those pieces. Didn't used to see a lot of Steadicam until recently. Drew Teese, who was in town, I believe was supposed to be on the panel at one point, now has the Arri Trinity, and he's good with it. A lot of people, think all you need is the Steadicam, but you really need to be trained up on it. You really need to know how to use it to maximize its potential. And now we have someone very solid in the Columbus area. Gordon operates a bit as well, I believe. Right? Don't think I've worked directly with you, but in Cleveland there's Adam White. Like a Steadicam when it's being operated by a professional is amazing. Dollies we use all the time. This happens to be pretty much a Chapman town, and truth be told, Chapman Super PV4 is probably my favorite camera platform. It is flexible, it is smooth, it just lets you get more done during the day. Gimbals, like we all say, are popular. I work with them a lot. But actually, a lot of times I do feel they were just being used because they don't have the money for a steady op or someone in particular that can really drive that camera.
I do think as a rental side, though, we're seeing maybe a little less gimbal work than we would have previously. I think a lot of it's gone to the smaller gimbal, your Osmos, your Ronin S kind of stuff, your Moza handheld kind of stuff, where it's all right here on maybe an A7 or something like that, where you're able to just get it and go, which I do think plays a little bit to what we were talking about previously with some philosophy stuff, where it's like, oh, it's just here, I can just go get the shot real quick, as opposed to taking the time to, let's say, hey, all right, let's lay 40 feet of dolly track here and do a really solid push we're gonna knock it out the first time. I think there's a lot of I'm seeing a little bit of a trend back towards more traditional. I've seen more dolly track laid in the last year than I have in the last 6. So I think that there's it all kind of comes in that trend, right? So the gimbal was trending for a long time. And I think as we go back to the idea of how do you differentiate yourself as a DP or as a camera operator, part of that comes back to you have to be able to set a new trend again. And that might be we're going to set a static shot, or that might be we're going to put it on a dolly and we're going to push it for 40 feet. So I think that plays into it quite a bit as well.
And just to tie into something that Casey was saying too, I mean, it really does come down to those experts in that tech. I mean, anybody can get their hands on the tech, but not everybody has put in the hours required to master that tech. So a Steadicam is completely worthless unless you've got a great operator. A dolly is completely worthless unless you've got a great dolly grip and a great person that can lay track and level it out and make sure that there's no seams. The Bolt, perfect. I mean, hundreds of hours of practice and research went into mastering that technology. So I know as a DP who usually operates my own stuff, as soon as we start getting into that kind of tech, I'm like, yep, somebody else is gonna op that. I'll still light it and I'll still frame it, but someone else is gonna op it. And man, you know, filmmaking is a community sport regardless, so you might as well rely on the experts that are around you, especially in this market, because we're blessed to have a lot of really good operators here.
I think I found that it seems that a lot of the technology is being combined, pardon me, so that you'll have things like, say, gimbal can be put onto a Steadicam arm. You don't need the rest of the sled. You just invert the thing with the right mount and put it on there. Then you can run through a doorway without seeing the step that you see with the gimbal. The, you know, with the, say, the jib arms, you know, combine them with a robotic controlled head that allows for a focus tracking point. Yeah, so there's, you know, the Bolt's an excellent example. You know, that thing could be building a car. Hey, throw a camera on it. You know, it's combined technology. And I think that's where I see things going. You know, even if it is the handheld gimbal with a phone on it, you know, it's like, okay, there's combining that technology.
Yeah, my favorite is building the jib on a dolly. You get to move all these different crazy places, right? So definitely a little more classical in terms of movement, in terms of what I like. You know, if I'm DPing and I actually get to hire a cam off of my choice, steady op is going to be probably the first things I look because of how versatile it is. And then look at those specialty shots of what the dolly is for, what the jib is for. Because a lot of times we get lost in the creative vision and we don't think of the logistics of what it takes. You know, I've been on mini sets where like, well, can we get the jib up in, 40 minutes? And I'm like, I haven't even landed the thing yet, and you want me to hike it, 2 miles up into the woods? No, I can't build it in 45 minutes. So to plan that out and go, here are these specialty shots. But, I've got to work with some great Steadicam ops. Nick's out in the audience, who's a monster from Cincinnati. Gordon, and I'm proof pudding of the fact that you have to have hours on a Steadicam. MLG goes, hey, do you want to go to California and run a Steadicam? And I'm like, sure, yeah, I've never ran one, just to let you know. They're like, great, fine, here it is. So I put this heavy thing on, and they have me running 50, 100 yards back and forth, and my director's like, why are you so shaky? I'm like, because I've never done this. I don't know what to tell you. But I'm here. That's that counts for showing up is part of it. You got to learn it somehow. So
That's the other thing. You have to be in shape. I remember the first time I put one on, I'm like, no way. Thank you. Don't want to do this. Anyway.
And
Yeah,
that
so.
I don't think that should dissuade anyone from wanting to learn those skills. We need people to learn those skills. It's just an understanding that in order to learn that skill, you got to put the time in. It's just like anything else in life, right? The more you practice it, the more you become an expert at it. So
show up and do it, and you'll get the hours.
You know, and to bounce off of that too, I would say that there is a good amount of folks here that are really talented in those skill set that would love to have a conversation with you. I mean, most of the time everyone's like, oh, I'm going to become the competition. They're not going to talk to me. Almost everybody in this industry that I've come across will pretty much sit down and have a conversation with me about what I'm interested in, what I'd like to do. You know, and to go one step further, the rental houses in this area, in Cincinnati, in Cleveland, our doors are open. Come by, like check out the tools, figure out if that's something you're interested in, see if you can push a dolly, see if you can operate it, see what it takes to build a jib. There's so many opportunities to have your hands on the tools in a market that probably shouldn't have all these tools. Shh, don't tell anyone. Scott, I hope you're not listening.
That just went out on live stream.
Oh, crap. But yeah, so I mean, get involved. Ask people. Ask DPs that have been doing it a while. That have been working with these tools. I mean, you look at some of the DPs, be it in the major films or even in the local markets, and they all have a style. You can if you get really good, you can identify a style of a DP. And that's a large part of how they move the camera. So have a conversation with them if you like what you're seeing on that stuff.
And be willing to start from the ground up. Everybody in camera movement wants an assistant. I don't want to lay 40 feet of dolly track by myself. I've done it. I don't want to do it again. Please help. I would love to have you come. Yes, I'll let you push the dolly because you laid track. Absolutely. Grab some apple box and let's get busy. Same for Steadicam ops. They have assistants that help to take the weight off to put down. So don't be afraid to say, hey, I'll come be an assistant. I want to learn these skills. That's 90% of my opportunities. I asked a question. Hey, I want to learn this. You want to have lunch? And that's where 90% of my opportunities came from.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to this combination too of like classical movement with all these new toys and things that are coming out every day. One of the best things that like I've done is just the fact that when I came fresh out of college, I didn't want to call myself a DP, and David and I kind of had a good conversation about this one time where it was like, I have too much respect for that term, and I was like, I want to learn from people that way, and so I took lower level positions. So I just asked like, hey, how do I do this? Like, what do I do here? And those are great questions. And getting on sets in lower positions, it seems like you're just gonna be taking too much time to get to a certain spot, but it's gonna be paying dividends in the long run. Because being in lower level positions, learning older tricks from DPs that, they've been doing it far longer and are far smarter than I am, you get to then start to see the combination of all of it, but the basics of that old school train of thought, dollies, and just like old like Steadicam tricks and stuff like that. And it's so much better because then you actually realize like, okay, now we're just kind of tweaking with those like old school philosophies, but with these new pieces of tech that are going to make it that much better, that much smoother, and we get to tell a better story because of that too.
Yeah, I don't think formal, or you guys call it classical, image making, but formal, I don't think formal will ever go out of style. It comes and goes a little bit, but there's always a place for that.
Well, and even in the newer tools, so let's take the Bolt, for example, we still utilize the same terminology, pan up, pan down, pan left, pan right, pan Dutch, pan, yeah. So it's one of those things where, as a DP, when we're working as operators, we're getting those same instructions. I need to truck left a little bit, let's boom up a little bit, tilt down a little bit. And it's those same kind of conversations, or we're going to truck along this way for X amount of time. So that same conversation of how you speak that vernacular is still important even in the new tools.
Great. Anything else on sort of the old tech? What about sliders? And there seems to be a slider on every truck now. We do a lot of B-roll stuff for these politicals and stuff, and that's like standard fare. And they're all, it's like speed rail that's 4 or 5 feet long. We used to have instead we always had at least a doorway dolly on low budget shoots, right? So a doorway dolly is kind of unlimited. I can push that sucker all over the place, but now I got
as long as your floor is flat.
As long as your floor is flat, right? But carpet, most hospitals are all pretty flat. But now it's that 4 feet. Yeah, it really changes everything. Put a wide angle on the other day, an ultra wide, low outside, and I'm like, yeah, you don't see any movement, do you? So you've got, you're going to have to think that through because now I've only got 4 feet of movement. Got to have my subjects come really close so that there's something going on, So it's just a different, a lot of the tools that are at your fingertips or not at your fingertips, inform what you do.
Yeah, any of those sliders or skate dollies, I mean, they're an absolute lifesaver because how many times do we have to shoot people in a cubicle? And if you don't have a little bit of motion on that, your shot is dead before you even pull the trigger.
Yeah.
So just having that 4 feet of, here's a 3-second move that looks pretty nice all of a sudden, and they're really quick to set up. So, yeah, that's been fantastic.
At the same time, you don't have to limit it to 4 feet. I've got one.
True. Oh, yeah.
Time-lapse slider, it's 12 feet, where with a motion head. The, I love the Dana Dolly. That's one product I really like just because, I've got speed rail that carries in a Pelican case, and it's like, I'd screw it together, figure out how much I need for that shot. The downside is you need stands, and luckily you get grip, okay. The tough thing is with sliders when you go long lens. As long as you're going wide or medium, okay, done. But you got to really plan in order to pop the P there, but you have to really plan in order to be able to get a long lens shot out with one of those.
Right. Okay, go ahead.
I feel like I never use the low boys when we get a Dana Dolly. They'll always go on Apple boxes. Don't even buy the stands. Just get Apple boxes. You'll be fine. That's where it lives.
Yeah.
Wow. How about both? How about both? The low boy stands, budgets.
We don't have budgets for stands.
All right. No budgets.
Your grip will love you saying, hey, let's bring both and not using the low boys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cart.
That's why you have those big carts. That's right. Carts are cheap, too. What about the new tech then? So we've got stuff that is kind of more more recent, you know, Gimbal's drones. We haven't even talked about drones. Of course, the robot we've mentioned a little bit. And then you just mentioned a little bit, I wanted to cover, you know, motorized sliders. Gordon, you talked about, and obviously time-lapse rigs and stuff like that. As well as something that I, you know, just mentioned a little bit earlier, and that's a lot of these little cameras with body stabilization and changing the way we shoot handheld, you know. And before we switch, though, I did want to, do you guys integrate old school handheld into much of your shooting these days? And is it still a skill that you think is worth learning? Because that was something that back in the day I always tried to pride myself on, was my handheld skills, and you know, they kind of, you know, it's kind of gone away a little bit.
No, you got it. If you can't handhold it, you're not moving really much anything else. It's,
Right.
you know, even in handholding, you're mimicking what a slider would do. You're unless you're wanting to add shake or something of that nature, but you're still trying to be smooth. And again, if we're going to broadcast and concert, like I'm in the pit most of the time, so I am either shoulder or handheld, and I'm moving back and forth. But it adds that energy, right? So if you can master handheld, right, those skills also translate, right? Same thing if I'm kind of pushing out and pulling in and stuff of that nature. It's the same kind of thing that a Steadicam would do, just obviously not as smooth.
Right.
So I definitely think it's a skill that you need to focus on if you want to be a camera operator.
Yeah, I think it also offers the human experience to the camera, which is important if you're going to make that shot live.
More organic. I agree. Yep.
I also think there's always going to be times where even if you've planned to get the shot on sticks, once that safety is in the can, you're going to grab it and you're going to get something else that's a little bit more, you know, avant-garde or has a little bit more energy to it. So I think it's always worthwhile to continue to practice and use those skills. And it's not necessarily all on the shoulder for handheld. I mean, handheld is, you know, top handle out in front of you. It's hanging it low. It's sticking up in the air. It's all of that. But understanding how to move that way and how to keep your body still and everything else, I think, is really helpful for that.
Okay. So Gimbal drones. Let's talk about drones a little bit. I guess that's camera movement, right? And now we can fly. That's pretty awesome. Maybe too awesome?
Yeah, sometimes it gets a little too awesome. Yeah, I love flying in the wind and such, you know, and then dealing with the FAA rules and, you know, getting a hold of airports and such. You know, I've done one shoot where we lifted, I want to say 8 times in one day. I got to know the tower personally that day from contacting them so much. But that and insurance, you just got to be on the up and up with it. That's the important part.
Yeah, for any producers out there, please only use licensed pilots. I mean, that is just absolutely critical. It's FAA is not messing around anymore. Used to be the wild, wild west, you know, 4 or 5 years ago when the drones first came out and anybody could do whatever they wanted. Now, if you're Billy Bob shooting in your backyard, you can do whatever you want, but as soon as you're trying to use that for a commercial purpose, FAA is going to come down hard on you. So please only use licensed pilots.
You know, and just to put into that, you're also putting your production at risk. You know, if you're not, it's not just that pilot or your day, but, you know, I mean, they're going to start coming after you as well. So
I think drones are really interesting because it is a new tech. It's a lot of learning, a lot of weird stuff. And it's, you know, watching old movies and some really crazy, awesome shots like The Shining over the lake and all these things where it's like, oh, now people can kind of do that. I think, though, it's another one of those things of practice makes perfect a lot, and a lot of what I was talking about before, like gimbal stuff, like a lot of people that are fresh to the game and start throwing up drones and stuff. It always kind of like hurts me a little bit when I'm watching this like beautiful shot, kind of this like long push over something, and then they like pan the camera just slightly, and it's like, oh my gosh, like why don't touch it, like. You know, if you're gonna do it, like turn the whole thing, because like that quick pan takes you out of it, and so it's that dangerous game I think right now with drones. They're so simple, they're so easy to use, but if it's not thought out properly, and if it's not someone that's experienced with it, you kind of just be doing it for movement's sake, and that move is kind of destroyed a little bit and takes you out of the actual story.
I also miss long lenses on a helicopter. Like we're talking about The Shining, the following the car shot. That's a fantastic shot. But the overuse of here's a super wide. Here it is. Like broadcast roll and stuff like that, I get it. But at some point, are you just putting one in there to put one in there, right? Or is there another way to establish it, right? So kind of think about that. A lot of the ones that you can buy on the market for personal use are just that super wide angle, small sensor. It's great for, you know, during the day. But again, go into a professional drone op, inspire 2 ops, put a lens on that thing, and if you're going to use it, utilize it to its full potential. Don't just throw it up there to get the shot. Like it's like even you were mentioning, like where it's like, oh, here's a little, we'll just leave it in there. No, you just ruined everything you did.
We're taking that one step further about thinking about your camera systems as a whole. You know, if you're shooting the day on a Venice or a Mini and you're out there, you know, with beautiful imagery, and then all of a sudden your DJI One is up in the air with a GoPro One, it's going to be a stark difference between a quality image and the super wide thing that we threw in there because the camera's moving in the air.
We're all fans of drones
I
up
was
here.
going to say, there's a lot of drone hate. I didn't want to do that. No. Anything else on drones? We don't want to do that either. Okay.
I think
so
one thing I wouldn't mind saying is that proper preparation and realizing that the weather is in control, you know, especially when it comes to safety and you want to actually pull off that shot. You know, you need to be able to look at the conditions.
Yeah, gray day is going to still look like a gray day whether you're 100 feet in the air or not. So.
Right. So what about motorized sliders and, you know, time-lapse rigs and things like that? I know, Gordon, you're like a specialist in that, right?
Yeah, I've been all over Utah with those things, and I tell you what, it's to me it's just a magical thing to be able to capture a spans of time with a motion rig, to be able to work foreground, particularly out there where everything's rocks. You know, you get into vegetation and such, then you've got to start playing tricks with software to be able to motion blur things. So as a result, you know, you can get distracting items in your foreground very easily with vegetation. But, you know, just being able to use the direction of the sun to plan your shots, tune up on photo pills to know where it's going to be at the right times, and then it's a beautiful tool. And I think the ability to move down a track during a shoot, move, shoot, you know, it's just a beautiful thing. I love those things.
Yep. It's a little bit like drones in the sense that, you know, that the whole beauty of that is we're not birds, right? So we can't do that. So it's like, oh, that's awesome. It's the same thing with, you know, we can't manipulate time within our own heads and eyes. And when you do, it's incredible. So, yeah. Anybody else play with time-lapse rigs?
I've done quite a bit. We have some time-lapse rigs here. A lot of times one of the reasons we ended up with the robot, in fact, was they were trying to be used for kind of real-time product shots. And there's a big price jump when you go from even the high-end prosumer, you know, sliders and heads up to things like the bolt arm. But there's a reason there's a price gap. Even with basically the best on the market, you know, prosumer motorized sliders, if you throw a, you know, somewhat heavy camera on there with a somewhat long lens and try to get a smooth real-time product shot, chances are you're going to have a lot of trouble getting that to work. And yeah, we tried for a long time, and the answer was to spend the money and buy the real thing. So.
Yeah, I've done shots with my Emotimo ST4, and that one's probably one of the better heads that I've run into. I've heard really good things about the ARC 2 by Rhino, and that's one that a friend of mine picked up, and I'll be messing around with that in early July when I meet up with him for a storm chasing trip. But it really...
You're a storm chaser too?
I will be at about midway through July.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a time-lapse
cool.
trip as well.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Okay. Well, we just have a few minutes left. Any questions, maybe? Take some questions from the audience.
I got one. This is where you come for the questions, really? That's it, right there. Hello?
Hello.
No, when you were talking about The Shining, it really made me think as kind of utilizers of all these tools, orchestrators of like movement with the camera, like in modern cinema, what are maybe some movement shots that either stick out, really, really work for the movie, but really what I want to know is what are the ones where you were like, how the fuck did they do that? Oh, okay. So is there any of those, like The Shining was a helicopter, but is there anything kind of classic or modern that really stands out to you guys as like either how did they do that or it was just spectacular?
Personally, kind of how Tim was bringing up 1917, like Deacons this last year, like that movie, my wife and I went to go see it and we both were just like, that was perfection, like holy crap, because all the camera movement was either awe-inspiring of just like, how did they switch like that movement into this position? Like there's one shot where this camera is underslung and maybe just a couple inches off of the water. They go over this lake to follow them as they're kind of like crossing the edge of it, or this like mud pit thing. And when I first watched it, it was amazing because it was just like, how did they do it? And then it was like pretty much on a track. And it was an American cinematographer, and I was kind of reading Deacon's talk about it. And every single shot was just like so pre-planned. Yep. Everything was talked about. It was like, how are we supposed to switch to that? So that's one that if you haven't seen it and you want to really look at and study camera movements and stuff, 1917 is something that I think will be talked about for a long time for that specific reason.
So I think they called that like the hydroscope or whatever they called it. It was this huge tank-looking thing with a telescoping boom on it. I was so mad I couldn't run that. I was like, I want to play with that so much. Yeah. One that sticks out to me, and I know it's probably not like classical movies or anything, but House of Cards, the opening on that, talk about use of camera movement and hyperlapses and kind of adding a surrealism with an emotion as something as, I don't want to say as simple as, but as elegant and unique as that. I thought was a beautiful opening, and it always kept pulling me back into another episode. The opening, the roll-in, to all the hyperlapses that would change. Like, it wasn't so much how did they do it, I just love how they executed it. It was just, to me, it was great.
And there's so much tech available nowadays that I like to go back and watch the classic movies. Like I think Orson Welles' Touch of Evil from '58. Have you seen that one? Oh, yeah. That beginning scene, it's unbelievable. The camera was huge, and
it was a drone, right?
Well, they had, it was a giant, drone, right, yeah. They had some giant jib thing that and I don't, half this stuff, I wonder if they just build it, custom for what they did. It's an incredible sequence. I don't know how long it is, I can't remember. 3-4 minutes or whatever, the open. Another one's Hitchcock's Notorious, where he built a gondola that hangs on a freaking wire, and it goes through this whole, massive dance hall and comes to a close-up of this woman holding a key in her hand. It's just like, and then you think the tools they had back then, it really blows your mind. So I don't know, that's what I like to do is watch the old ones, but yeah. Anybody else? Question? Yeah.
So I was hearing you guys talk about universally how you don't like drones. So my question is, because I'm a jib operator, is jib work still very present? Are people going to utilize jib work for the next 5 years or so, or are they going to make the transitions to drones eventually?
It would seem that, particularly in concert production and such, drones are not a good idea. Yeah. Because of the crowds, sports, it's cable cam, and concerts, jib. In many productions, a jib ends up, you get a technocrane, and it takes the place of a dolly. So, yes and no. I've definitely lost some jib rental business to drones. That's why I'm a certified drone op. So, but yeah, there is some give and take,
I think with that too, the other piece that is coming down the line is that Unreal Engine kind of stuff. So as we start to look at how we can move a camera in a mixed virtual space, I think we're going to start to see encoders added to more formal pieces of gear, dollies and jibs and whatnot. We're going to be able to take that information out of the head and the arms and the wheels and actually be able to translate that into a form that we can actually then modify a virtual camera in real time. So I think that we may see some of that, again, traditional tool set return with that new tech kind of added to it.
And at least for my money, there are still few things that are prettier than a well-executed jib move. Yeah. When you see a really well-done one, that's something that can live forever. Time and budget will always be considerations for jib work, but there are many things that jibs can still do way better than, and drones can't even touch them. So.
Now, to add to that, I know you said the technocrane is Stanton Jimmy Jib kind of like the route to go to stay with the jibs, or like different brands, like learning the technocrane or learning different models of jibs? Is that something that would help out in the jib industry?
I would expand your horizon as much as you can.
Way beyond it.
Yeah, so find yourself a techno, find yourself a hydroscope, find yourself not only a jimmy jib, but also a cam mate. Like if moving a camera up and down, left and right with a remote head is your thing, find them all.
And know the market that you're working in, too. There are some markets that'll support some jibs and not others. So kind of know what your market research is, too.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, this is mostly for the young people who are just getting into the business that don't have a lot of money. Do you guys have any cameras in the back of your mind that are lower budget cameras that just are really like the best kept secret in the industry? For me, way back there was a Sony camera called the PD-150 that is there a PD-150 today? That's of high def or 4K or whatever. That's like what the PD-150 was.
It's light and sensors, right? So it's light and sensors, right? So whatever camera you can afford, that's the best camera you can have for your purposes right there. You can shoot on a Nikon 7100 and make it look beautiful, right? And that's one thing that camera movement, lighting, all these variables that we're talking about is. Don't get caught up too much in the technology, right? That will come with budget and time. But for the young ones just starting out, if you have a sensor, you have a lens, that's the perfect one for you at the time. Utilize that, use movement to make as much out of that one lens and one camera as you have. And then as you grow, people will recognize that. You'll have a little bit larger budget, or you can even say, hey, I'm going to go rent this lens or this thing now to play. But rent. But yeah, whatever's in your hand is the perfect tool.
Yeah, I mean, to bounce off of that, yeah, obviously you can rent. There's multiple resources for that. I would also say don't be afraid of older gear, right? Yeah. I mean, there are still cameras made by all of the vendors that are here that are gorgeous, gorgeous cameras that you can get for a fraction of what they were when they were brand new. I mean, yeah.
You can throw that to XL1, Canon XL1 is like a $200 camera, and that was a monster back in the day. SDI out to a recorder, boom, you got a 4K camera, right? So there's all different ways to kind of use technology, but yeah, they're cheap. Whatever you have in your hand, that's the perfect camera for you at the time.
Keep an eye on some of the bigger rental houses out in the Chicago, LA, New York market. A lot of times they're offloading all kinds of stuff. I saw a rental house out of Chicago that was offloading 40 Alexa Classics for a fraction of what you could have gotten them for. They also had a ton of F3s and F55s, I believe.
Well, thanks for that call.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to flood my market. So.
I think we're done. But yeah, okay. And last question: when will AI replace us?
You see that robot out there?
Uh-huh. All right. Well, thanks, everybody.
Let's give our hand one more. Well, y'all just gave a hand, but we can give another hand. One for the panel, but all just in general for the 2020 Gear Show. Thank you guys all for coming out. It's been a great time. Thanks for sticking with this, especially at this, weird time. But in general, also, we have some cool things. Before I throw out some cool things, get ready. Just one more thing upon the shuttle right now. If you guys are depending on the shuttle, the last shuttle that will be leaving is at 8:15 p.m. So if you need to use that shuttle, make sure you get on it before 8:15 p.m. because you will not be able to get on it otherwise. Other than that, thank you all for coming out. We all really appreciate you for being here and creating this community that we call film. And enjoy yourself. Drive safe tonight. I think it's raining outside. It looks like it's raining outside. Drive safe, like we said. We'll see you next year. And have a great freaking night. 2020 Gear Show. All right, everyone, let's go! Whoa!